Ladies and gentlemen, now we are definitely live. We had a quick false start, but I love technology because when it's not connected, then not much can go wrong, or at least you can't get hurt. But now we are connected to the global internet, and ironically, we're going to be talking about one of the greatest cyber attacks in history and how it has evolved. For those of you listening live today, welcome. There is a comment section. Please engage the comment section with questions, comments, feedback, arguments, whatever it might be. We will engage you. For those listening in the archive, this is the day before the 5-year anniversary of WannaCry. And today we have Maya Horowitz from our head office. We also have Dan Wiley from our office in the Americas. And welcome to the show. Let's get right at it, actually. So I want to remember that point in time where you were when you first heard about WannaCry. There's this strange neuroplastic moment that takes place whenever there's a big event in our lives, and we remember exactly where we were. So whoever would like to go first, where were you when that first ransomware attack, WannaCry, came past your desk?
So Eddie, I'll go ahead and go first. So we answered the phone, and a customer called that was compromised, and that was the very first that we'd ever heard of this attack. Our incident response team actually helped the customer start reverse engineering what had occurred, and we actually called in Maya's team immediately to start reverse engineering what we were dealing with and trying to identify what this new thing was and what it was actually doing. It was fairly surreal because we weren't sure what we had when it started. A few hours later, we figured it out pretty quick.
Well, and before Maya responds with where she was, I just want to mention for the audience that when Dan says he called Maya's team, Maya leads our threat research group. And so these people are on the cutting edge of whatever's going on in the wild. You know, they're the ones that you kind of pick up the bat phone to. So Maya, what about yourself? And actually, let me just say a quick hello to Mohammed, one of our team members in London. Mohammed, you just recently got minted in the office of the CTO. So well done, my friend. Congratulations. And we've got some colleagues just chiming in as well from our YouTube channel. Thank you. So yeah, Maya, what about yourself? Where were you in time and place in the first ransomware attack?
So I actually have a very vivid memory of this event, and it's because it was a Friday, and Friday is a day off in Israel, where most of our research team is located. And we were actually in a wedding. One of our team members got married that day, and we were at her wedding. And then we started getting phone calls, and you know, we had drank quite a lot of wine before that. So really it was pretty chaotic to be, you know, you talked about our great research team. So this whole research team was at the wedding. Yeah, so starting to investigate this issue from there was pretty hilarious. But unrelated to that, I mean, the first few hours were actually chaotic because we didn't really know what happened. We saw the images, right, of stores where there was a ransom note reflected in their windows, and the WannaCry ransomware was just everywhere around the globe, it seemed, but we didn't really know how it got there. So to start looking into the data, and at first people thought that it came through an email and it was a phishing attack. It actually wasn't. It was an exploit of a vulnerability. But so really there were many bits of information that were misleading, and trying to understand the real story there was a very interesting analysis to do.
I think even for us, Eddie, it was sort of a brave new world because it took sort of the community as a whole to figure out quickly what we were dealing with. And on the incident response team, we were working with Maya's team, we were working with DHS, we were working with private entities and public entities, and just trying to reconstruct the crime scene of what we were actually dealing with. Since the delivery was a vulnerability, it's different, right? It's not an email delivery. And so your telemetry, your data, your forensics is all different. And it was actually an eye-opening experience, I think, for the entire industry to realize that you needed to observe the environments in a holistic way and not just concentrate on email, like Maya was saying. So it was a heck of a learning experience for all of us on the front line.
Yeah.
I'm going to say hello to some listeners, and then I want to get into, what is it exactly that both your teams do when they break these things down? Like, how do you reconstruct these scenes? But let's say hello to another one of our colleagues, Miguel. Thank you very much for joining us, Miguel. We've got LinkedIn user who is Keely Wilkins. Hello, Keely. Thank you for joining us today. And Mohammed from our team in London is saying, when WannaCry hit, I was driving around several National Health Service trusts, that's the UK's healthcare facility, to unplug some critical infrastructure. Wow. So physically unplugging, that was the response, hey? Yeah, I think a lot of people were physically unplugging boxes that day. But for those who are reconstructing crime scenes, how do you do this?
So, Maya, do you want to start and I'll finish off, or do you want me to start?
Well, I just wanted to comment about something that Eddie said earlier, which was that this was the first ransomware attack. So it wasn't the first ransomware attack, right? It was maybe the first or one of the first high-profile ransomware attacks, because before that, ransomware, it was just something that attacked very specific computers, encrypting some photos, right, and asking for a $300 ransom. So it was kind of I will say, B2C, let's call it. Right. So it was for consumers, and I think that in WannaCry, it was it really became very clear that this was targeting companies and different enterprises. And this also relates to the comment about NHS. All of a sudden, ransomware is not, a silly problem of one machine that doesn't function, but it can actually take down networks, and sometimes they are critical networks. So this, I think, was the real what was why this event was so meaningful.
Yeah, it really created a new economy, Eddie. Like the whole ransomware landscape, very shortly after that, shifted from consumer focused to enterprise focused, and now it became, a multi-$100 billion or billions of dollars worth of compromises and extortions in a very, very short period of time. So after WannaCry, you saw a ton of different ransomware gangs build out their infrastructure and really target companies forcefully to make a lot of money over the last few years.
Right.
I think to answer the question on the forensics side is that it wasn't simple. Like the first few hours were chaotic because no one knew the entry point. We knew everyone got encrypted, but we didn't know that there was a vulnerability. We didn't know which vulnerability was being used. We didn't know what the lateral movement was. There were a lot of different things we didn't know. So we tried to reconstruct the crime scene as quickly as we can, but most of the victims that we were interfacing with didn't have the data to reverse engineer it. So now you really are, it's a needle in 20 haystacks that you're trying to find to figure out how that initial delivery actually occurred. And there's a lot of folks that were instantly, parachuting in to try to reverse engineer it. And it took, 3 or 4 hours, if not longer, to truly understand the entire scope of how WannaCry actually operated. So it wasn't simple, and there wasn't a lot of data, especially on the lateral side.
You mentioned earlier, Dan, that you worked with the DHS on this particular first one. Now, I wonder why that is. I mean, it must have been a critical infrastructure company because, typically when people are breached, government isn't generally getting involved.
Oh, incorrect.
Okay.
We were actually working with US CERT to actually share fast-moving events like this. So a lot of the certs, government certs, both in Israel and in Europe and the United States, we're actually sharing a lot of experiences all the time because we're waiting for something like this to happen, right? We're waiting to quickly identify a nation or global-wide event. And even with subsequent very large global events, NotPetya, SolarWinds, and the list kind of goes on, the sharing of telemetry is actually really important to get the message out to be able to stop it from propagating or getting worse. It's critically important because once you know how something is working, you need to disseminate that as quickly as possible to limit the amount of damage. And with WannaCry, a lot of those, processes and procedures were broken and didn't work very well. Some of them did. We've learned a lot of lessons as sort of a community, but we definitely work as a team globally to try to defend the world.
I'm really pleased to hear it, that on big events like this, people are working together as a team. I want to get to some questions, but I'm not quite sure if I understand your question. Majidul, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We'll just say Mr. Islam. That'll be easier for me. You say, please detail ransomware attacks or type of ransomware attacks. I think that's perhaps what you're asking. If you're asking me, please, can you go through some details on the types of ransomware attacks? Just give me a thumbs up or a yes if that's the question. I want to jump into Tal Eisner, who runs in our Sydney office, one of our team members. This is not clickable for me, but if you go to research.checkpoint.com, and then just do a search for global outbreak or WannaCry, you'll get this article. So thank you very much, Tal, for giving that to us.
I wanted actually to comment. Dan said that that we work with different entities in order to help secure not only our customers, but to try and help all companies out there be safer, right? And we can do it through certs, through law enforcement. But in the case of WannaCry, there is one story that probably many have already forgotten. But with WannaCry, we actually we were able to be the ones to save quite a lot of organizations from ever being encrypted, not only to stop it on their environments, but to actually just stop the attack from happening. And the story was that in WannaCry, it actually had something pretty rare, I think, that is called a kill switch. So it's a domain that if it returns an answer, which means if it is actually purchased by someone and it's online and returns a response, then it stops the malware from operating. And so one researcher found you, and you asked about what we do in the research itself. So one researcher found that there was a kill switch and registered it. And so and this is how he stopped the first wave of the attack. But a day or two later, there was a new wave of WannaCry ransomware, and it had another kill switch that one of our analysts, Aviran, is still here. He was the one to find, and he registered this domain and was able to stop the attack. This was the end of WannaCry. So in some rare but very cool cases, we are actually able to really block attacks, not only for Checkpoint customers, but to help the entire security community in defending against these attacks. And we definitely see it as part of our mission, right?
It reminds me to mention to the audience that, we give away our IOCs, 86, 90 billion of them for free for anybody to use as they see fit. I think I got that right too. So let me just jump into a few comments here, and then we're going to continue with the dialogue. Watching us on YouTube is Mr. Ansari. We'll go with that. I can't get your first names, my friend. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tal is giving us another recommendation at research.checkpoint.com. So please check that out, and I'll also add it to the show notes afterwards to make it clickable for you. Ashwin, thank you very much, Ashwin, from our Sydney. So my goodness, Tal and Ashwin, what time is it over there? You're
do they even sleep? Like, what the hell?
You're 11 o'clock at night, my friend.
Rude.
Ashwin is saying approximately 50 countries impacted. When I went to bed next morning, it was reported 130. Isn't there like 200 countries in the world recognized by the UN? So over 50% of countries in less than 12 hours. Well, less than 3 hours, because Ashwin clearly only gets that much sleep. Yeah. So Mr. Islam is saying thank you so much. So I think what he was asking there is, can we detail some different types of ransomware attacks? And then we will jump into this comment by Keely again. So Keely was saying, I was in a more strategist type of role at the time. Trying to decipher the info being shared from the research teams was a challenge, as I had to synthesize it for my customers and determine next steps for each of them. Actually, I'd like your comments on that, because there's a little bit of that I'm not quite understanding. So I imagine both of you do. Let's comment on that, and then let's get into Mr. Islam's type of ransomware attack question.
So Eddie, it's real simple. It's called the fog of war. And if you ever are in a frontline sort of situation, you're in a car accident or a crime scene, or if you're a first responder, or if you're in war, the reality changes extremely, extremely quickly. And we saw, especially in WannaCry, NotPetya, and a few other events, where the researchers are so quick to get information out that not all of it makes sense yet. Like, all the pieces of the puzzle aren't clearly laying out the puzzle. And the first day, first 2 days, things are moving at such a pace where you kind of have to fill in the blanks in some of this to be able to either make educated guesses or try to put the pieces of the event together into a way that you can actually defend your network. You know, it took a while to figure out which vulnerability was being used, right? We had an idea, but we needed confirmation. Confirmation takes time, and that's the fog of war. You don't know exactly what to do and where to go, and maybe it's better just to go ahead and unplug if there is a vulnerability of that scale and it's being impacted your entire infrastructure, until you know exactly what you're dealing with and how to defend it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And you know what? Let's just get to, hey, Jeremy, thank you very much for dialing in from head office, saying great conversation, much appreciated. Jeremy runs our EBC, so our executive business centers. So we have one in our Tel Aviv office. That's our big one. We always invite our customers out there. Come sit down with our developers. Come sit down with people like Maya and Dan. Let's work out these problems together. It's a great center, and it's a wonderful place to go visit if you've never visited. So please do that and get a hold of Jeremy. You can find him on LinkedIn. We've also got a comment here from Al Hassan, and I was scared of WannaCry. A lot of people were scared of WannaCry, my friends, on the customer side. Tal's jumping in with more recommendations. Actually, great. Yeah, checkpoint.com/customer-stories. So, you know, you'll get some good stories there. And Tal's also telling us shipping logistics leader IMC deploys Checkpoint Harmony to safeguard supply chain data. Any comment on that, by the way, on supply chain data and how our product set might be able to circumvent some of these attacks and prevent them? At all?
Your turn, Maya. No.
Rock, paper,
scissors,
scissors.
paper. Who wants to take it?
I'm still waiting for us to get back to the question about ransomware types, which is what we promised our audience to talk about today. So,
well, let's talk double. When was the first time we started seeing double and then triple extortion ransomware? Where were you on those times? And and then let's explain what those are to people as well.
Yeah, so this isn't a specific moment in time, right? But just a trend of attacks where, well, if to be very accurate about the history of modern ransomware, it started 2013, okay, with CryptoWall, CryptoLocker, and these were ransomware that just encrypted one computer, asked for what today we see in perspective as a fairly small ransom, which was about $300. And this is what I previously called the B2C ransomware. And a few years later, it developed. It started doing lateral movement, and this was what WannaCry was all about. This vulnerability that it was using, it was actually a vulnerability that enables very, very efficient lateral movement within and outside of a network, and it's, using the SMB protocol. And just sometime after that, they moved to doing what we call the double extortion. So since they started doing lateral movement, the threat actors could get to data centers. And so they don't only encrypt a specific machine, but they get to a data center, to the databases, and they send out the data from them. They actually steal the information from their victim. So they steal customer data and PII, source code, financial data. And the double extortion means that there are two things that they ask for the money for. One is in order just to decrypt the files, but also the money is so that they don't publicly share all the information they had stolen from the network. And of course, and this is what actually enabled them to ask not for $300, but for, say, $3 million. And a company would actually pay, because if this information is released, they could have to pay a fine, say, for GDPR. Okay, they lost customer data, and of course all the brand that is sometimes ruined, and the PII that is shared, etc. So this is why ransomware today is so much more profitable. The triple extortion is, and by the way, this is the B2B era of ransomware. The triple extortion is means that in some sophisticated cases, threat actors don't only ask for the ransom from their direct victim, but also from their customers. So now that they have the data of all the victims' customers, they can contact them one by one and say, hey, we have your information because we broke into this and that vendor that you're using. If you don't pay, or if you do pay, we will remove your specific files when we share this information, or we'll just use you to put more leverage on our direct victim. So tell them to pay us so that your data isn't publicly shared. And I will say that we are doing this broadcast now, and just this week there was another development that I think will be part of the history of ransomware development, which is the B2Gov era. So just in the past week, there were quite a few attacks of ransomware, a specific ransomware group called Conti, where they attacked countries. So they attacked Costa Rica and Peru. And when I say they attacked a country, it means that they broke into a very wide variety of government entities of these countries, stole their data, and threatened to publish it again. So they're doing the double extortion on these countries, and it's not that now this is like a nation state attack. No, it's pure cybercrime, and they say that they're not doing it on behalf of some country just for the money, but they just realized that companies have more money than individuals, and countries have more money than companies. So they're just after the money. So the development is where they find the money or where they find the leverage. This is what they do.
I feel that, it reminded Dan, when you first started the incident response team at Checkpoint, I remember you saying to me, the first phone call is always going to be free, because it's such an emotionally taxing time for people that are on the receiving end of a, any type of cyber attack. Why don't you just let folks know how they can get hold of your team, while I sort out a few comments here, and then we'll jump into some comments and back into the conversation. How do people get hold of the incident response team, Dan?
Quite simple. All you have to go to is www.checkpoint.com, and there's a big button in the upper right-hand corner that says, "Are you under attack?" Click that button, and you'll see multiple ways that you can contact us. You have both a phone number and an email address where you can interface with our team 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have analysts around the world ready to assist with anything that you might have. And the first phone call, we understand the scope of what we're dealing with, and we'll provide you sort of our next steps on how we deal with these events that you're finding. So we'll understand what we deal with and give you a remedy on how we can actively solve some of these issues for you.
So go to checkpoint.com and you'll see a button in the top right-hand corner that's saying under attack ? Hit it, and you'll get to a member of Dan's desk. Okay, lovely. So let's get to a few more comments here. Tal's jumping back in, not sleeping in Australia, shipping logistics leader. I think I read that one. Okay, so we're going to go to Nilesh saying Marcus Hutchins and WannaCry. Was Marcus Hutchins the name of a ransomware attack? I missed that one, or I don't remember.
No,
So yeah, go ahead, Maya. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So there were multiple campaigns of WannaCry, or multiple copycats and multiple attacks that were looking just like WannaCry. But the very first instance of WannaCry, Marcus Hutchison was an analyst that was actually able to identify one of the domains that was being used in one of the campaigns, and he was able to register it very quickly, just like Maya explained earlier, and was able to sinkhole it very, very quickly.
This was the kill switch story.
The kill switch, exactly. Marcus has a storied past. There's a whole articles, and you should probably go read about his background. Not a bad kid. May have done some bad things.
Good.
He's generally a good guy.
Good to know. Mo in London is asking, do we still see WannaCry attacking customers? So are the people still vulnerable to this now, or are we done?
Vulnerable to? Yes. Do we see active WannaCry campaigns? I don't think so. Maya can speak to the stats that we're seeing in ThreatCloud, but from an IR perspective, we do see Eternal Blue, which was one of the attack vectors, still being compromised today.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a virus, so it will live forever in the sense that because people are still vulnerable, it can keep doing this ping pong in the internet forever. But the campaign itself is dead, so there's no ransomware in the end of it.
So very problematic, but you might have
neutral
extra dollar in your jeans. Mr. Islam, could you please expand on your question? How much possible ransomware attack data recovery? I think what you might be asking me, my friend, is how to ensure data recovery when you're under a ransomware attack. You may be talking about offsite backups, something like that. If you just give a little bit more detail, we absolutely want to answer your question. Tal is just very busy giving us links. Thank you so much, Tal. That's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, just bookmark all of these because we've got some great research out there. We've got a fantastic blog. Here's our blog that Tal's going to, showing everybody. Here's all the extra intelligence you might need based on the conversation that we're having with Dan and Maya. And this one is from Front Row Seat. So sometimes my software obfuscates the sender. I'm not seeing it here. But the question is, I had Front Row Seats for MDR, SOC, and WannaCry, not Petri and Eternal Blue. Very interesting times to be an incident response threat hunter. Yes, you will be forever employed, my friend. So that's the upside. Dialing in from our YouTube channel is Kitrong saying hello, and you're part of the Checkmates team. So thank you very much. Checkmates is our user community. I think we have something like 160,000 of them now, or maybe more, that Phoneboy and Moti are just real community builders. So thank you for that, guys, and thank you for being a checkmater for us. And Mo's jumping in saying, okay, let's have a look at this comment. The report from 2021 shows WannaCry still exists and is a threat, which is interesting. Yeah, you can go to our security report, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. If you go to go.checkpoint.com/security-report, there is an interactive version of it right here. It's actually a great tool for people to show non-cyber users. So go show this to your executive, because it's written in very much layman's terms so people can understand it. This is a good read for the CEOs, the CFOs, the general counsels, to help support the CISOs and the department of the CISO in their work. So that's that tool right there. Thank you very much. Tal's still jumping in. Lots of reading here. We've got lots of homework to do. Let's have a look at this comment. A conversation I've often found myself pulled into is if nation-state cyber attackers are protected by the Geneva Convention. Interesting. There's a lot to that conversation, but the consensus is no, they are not. So we heard from Dan that, we're working with intelligence groups around the world, and there's collaboration. Countries are now being attacked. That happened this week. Maya was just mentioning that with Costa Rica. I think it might only be time before there is a much stronger collaborative government effort. Can I get comments from either Maya or Dan on that? I think it's an interesting one.
So I think yesterday there was an announcement by both UK, United States, and EU government agencies about a satellite hack that was impacting Viasat right before the invasion of Ukraine, where Russian threat actors basically bricked all of the satellite terminals for Viasat, like
Wow.
tens of thousands of satellite terminals. What, again, this doesn't have a lot to do with ransomware, but what it's doing is Western governments are fed up with this shit. Like, they're done.
Yeah.
And they have already started sanctioning, especially Russian actors, North Korean, Iranian, and Chinese, to basically level up a little bit. Again, it's not enough to disincentivize it completely, but we're seeing that all of the Western governments are starting to lay a legal precedent to be able to say, under these situations, this is sort of normal. This is active war kind of activity, and this can be used as a retaliation. And that is being laid down as legal framework in every single one of the Western governments that are specifically around Ukraine. So, to answer your question, it's going to get real, folks. And I think cyber is part of the kinetic element of nation states. It's a tool that they're going to use. And if it's used in the right way, in the right situation, and the attribution can be led all the way back to the right country, you're going to see activities to be able to dissuade that kind of activity in the future. And that could be anything from sanctions all the way to actually war.
Right. Right. Okay, let's get to, there's a question here by Ed Odenwalder, I believe. Just curious, if I need help negotiating a settlement, who do I call? So that's Dan and his team. And so you go to checkpoint.com, and at the top right-hand corner, there will be a button saying under attack, ? You're going to click that button, and you're going to get a free phone call to a bunch of awesome cyber ninjas who will come in, swoop in, and help you with that, Ed. We have from a LinkedIn user, I think that might be Aaron. What is the prediction about ransomware behavior in the future? It works like SaaS now. So what is next level? Any new behavior in connection to war in Ukraine? More ransomware attacks are now against Russian targets, but before the war, it was mostly attacks from Russia to other countries. Maya, I think this is probably a good question for you and the researchers.
Yeah, so I think, and I started talking about the history of ransomware, and we can see that what threat actors are going for is just the more money, more leverage, and more, we'll even call it boutique attacks, right? So it's not the spray and pray, as many victims as we can with just a small amount of money from each and every one of them, but it's going after the big money. And we can even see that for some threat groups, they actually check for the annual revenue of a company in order to decide on the ransomware amount and the ransom amount that they're going to ask for. So they look for how much money they earn, and then a specific percent of this revenue is what they ask for. And this is why they go for the bigger fish now. And so this is what we're seeing. They are going after more and more large companies and enterprises. And I think, we saw the evolution from just encrypting to also stealing the data. And maybe we'll actually see a shift to only stealing the data, because all the encryption stuff, that's too complicated. And it's not the real issue now. The issue is the data breach. And so I think we'll stop seeing them doing it, just like the Lapsus group did just a couple of months ago in the attacks on Microsoft and on Samsung and a few others, Okta. The issue there was not encryption at all, and it was a few millions of dollars in each and every one of these attacks. So I think that technically this is what we'll see. And also, as to the threat actors themselves, they act just like a business, right? It's not an individual. These are large groups. For the Conti group, for example, it has about 100 people working for it. Okay, they have developers and HR and everything that a corporate would have, a high-tech company would have. So we are seeing more consolidation because these are large groups, and so as you said, Eddie, they act in a SaaS model, and they act as a service. So it's ransomware as a service. There are the developers, but there are affiliates who would use the tools in their attacks. So yeah, more consolidation, larger targets, and probably less encryption and more data breaches.
You're absolutely spot on, Maya. It reminds me of an article I wrote for this lovely little blog called cybertalk.org. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen, cybertalk.org. You should definitely bookmark this blog. It's purely about cybersecurity. It's very high level. Again, it's good to help you educate your peers, right, outside of the department of the CISO. And it was about the CNA insurance breach. Now, CNA insurance got breached, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, something like that. And apparently nothing happened with the data, but guess what? CNA Insurance is one of the largest cybersecurity insurers. And so what we suspect is what threat actors just wanted to know, what's the maximum payout? You know, if it's $5 million and I'm going to go attack some pipeline somewhere, I'm asking for the maximum amount, $5 million. So I think you nailed that one, absolutely. This is from Aaron Lancaster. So Aaron, thank you. People spin up vulnerable machines all the time. Secure baseline configuration is a must. Can one of you explain what that is? Secure baseline configuration. What do you guys think?
If you're patched and you don't have any security vulnerabilities that are known, you're in a much better shape than if you have a machine that has a bunch of vulnerabilities and hasn't been patched. Simple as that.
Beautiful. One sentence. Thanks, Dan. What else were you gonna jump in? I think I interrupted.
No, I was gonna say, just be smart about it. If you don't need a service exposed to the internet, don't expose it. Yeah. You know, one of the things that is amazing about the cloud is you don't even need an OS anymore. You can just run functions, right? Like the attack vector changes very dramatically if you're just using, for example, Lambda, you know, so you change the whole dynamic. Yeah.
Well, and you said if it doesn't need to be connected to the internet, don't connect it. This is my solution to big data problem. If you're not using it, delete it. I mean, but no one's going to do that. They think there's gold in that big data somewhere.
And no one's going to patch everything. That's
right.
I mean,
so
it's almost it's almost impossible to actually create a secure system. I will say it is impossible to have 100% secure thing. It just isn't. But the reality is, if you take some basic precautions and some basic hygiene items, you're going to do much better than if you were just to run outside naked.
Gotcha. Exactly. Let's say hello to a few more people here dialing in from wherever they are in the world. Hello, everybody. Hello back, my friend. Who is this LinkedIn user? It's already disappeared on my other device. Thanks for the shout out. I'll have to try and remember who that was. Thanks for the shout out. Where are you? Thanks for the shout out. You're in there somewhere, my friend. You are very welcome. Let's have a look here. Yes, Tal mentioned the security report that I put up a little earlier. Charles saying hello, and there's probably another part for the question there, my friend. So we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, let's have a look at this question. On the topic of SAT terminals, do you think the same type of attack is an area of concern for Starlink as they are supporting Ukraine? Interesting. They certainly seem to intend to hold Elon accountable. Actually, I'm not sure why the connection with Elon there? Are you talking about
because he owns Starlink?
Oh, that's right. Yes, of course. Right.
No, and he also basically said, "Bring it on, baby," and they're doing a pretty good job defending themselves. But look, the reality on all of these things is that it's still a computer on both sides, and Starlink and SpaceX are doing an amazing job defending their infrastructure, and very smart engineers doing very smart things to protect their infrastructure and their terminals and their users. But the reality is it's still a computer, and you know, one mistake, one issue, one vulnerability that someone's not aware of, and you can cause, you know, an outage very similar to what you saw with Viasat. I think what you're seeing is modern warfare. and you're starting to get glimpses of it, of what we've been predicting for years and years and years and years. But it's interesting. It's playing out in very interesting ways. So, for example, there's a story that Russians have stolen a whole bunch of John Deere tractors from Ukrainian farms and shipped them to Russia. And once they got to Russia, they didn't work because they've been locked out, because they've been stolen. A very small little, anecdote, but that sort of logic is actually starting to be everywhere in our lives. The phones, the infrastructure, the banking, satellites, your car, they're all interconnected and can be used in warfare, both psychological and real warfare.
Right. And I must admit, I'm struggling to form an opinion on this new kind of warfare, because you remember in the first few weeks of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Ukrainian president said, hey, help me with the cyber warfare. And what was it? 250,000 people signed up to a Telegram account in a week. And we're talking about, I just imagine people in basements, and, it's like, where's the coordination? I mean, it's just interesting is the word I can come up with. I'm not sure if I think it's a good thing or a bad thing. I haven't quite formulated an opinion on it yet, because 200,000 people trying to coordinate, first, that's a big problem for a start, because you can't. And we're almost sort of celebrating. So 1 in 5, I'll have to find the stat on this to fact check myself. I'll do that while you're talking. 1 in 5 attacks against individuals in the world today are on Russian citizens. And so, are we talking about the old lady going to the grocery store? So it's tough for me to have an opinion on whether this is good or bad. I'll find that stat in a minute to make sure I'm accurate with it. Unless you have a comment, I'm going to jump back into the audience comments. Ladies, and did you have a comment?
So that this Ukraine IT army, it had, now obviously it's even more volunteers, but there was a target list. So they don't need to coordinate or to collaborate. They have a list, and any hacker who feels capable can just choose their target. And there were government entities, but also banks and other things that could disrupt life. Just the other day, there was an attack against the supplies of alcohol in Russia, because this is something that would bring down the morale. Okay, so there are many targets, and each hacker can choose their own.
Okay, and the target list came from where? From the government of Ukraine?
Yes.
Wow. So a government puts up a target list and tells citizens around the world, jump into the fight. Dan, what were you going to say, man?
This isn't new, right? I mean, we've seen the same thing with Anonymous making calls to the public to do things. It's probably one of the first times we've had a government saying, other than, hey, this is the FBI 10 most wanted, I want these guys. Right. We see this happen throughout history. So it's not like it's that weird. I think what worries me, though, is obviously of the 250,000, I'm going to say 1% are elite. And what I mean by that, maybe even a fraction of 1% are elite. And what I mean by elite are the ones that could actually break into military installations and military infrastructure and use the ability that they might have to disrupt military activities. And we've seen that play out. That worries me to no end, because it's one thing if it's a nation state security apparatus attacking another military, infrastructure. There are some rules of engagement. There's rules of order, and there's rules of how to engage and how not to burn your sources and how not to accidentally launch a missile. Like that's the part that worries me the most, is that, obviously there's many safeguards to block, other nations from doing that. Yeah. But I don't think we're that far from that reality.
There could be a zeitgeist moment where, a government says, hey, somebody else did this, but they launched the missile, right? Kind of like when Hitler burnt down the, I forget the name of that building there. To instigate a much larger scale attack. Let's see here. LinkedIn user, we're getting so many comments. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I can't grab your name from my other devices. We have seen a lot of high impact Azure vulnerabilities this year. Yeah, in fact, Maya's team found a vulnerability in Azure which allowed them, okay, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, Maya, so you're going to jump in and correct me, that allowed a threat actor to essentially go lateral into other cloud instances. Do cloud governance tools like Do9 help address these? Maya, I'd love to give you this one.
So first of all, in Checkpoint Research, we found the first remote code execution attack on Azure. It was a 10 out of 10 severity vulnerability. And thanks to our coordinated disclosure with Microsoft, it was patched. And obviously, whenever we find a vulnerability or something is published, we make sure that the Checkpoint cloud solutions are also able to block it. And by the way, not only do they block the vulnerabilities that are reported, but there is also a lot of machine learning behind the scenes and things that actually block attacks that are unknown publicly. And oftentimes when something is published, we look back at the logs and see that we had actually blocked it before. So yeah.
And I would also add, my friend that who asked the question on Dome 9, which we're now calling Cloud Guard, as part of our Cloud Guard family. So when you go to our website, you're going to see 3 main categories. You go to checkpoint.com, you're going to see Harmony Cloud Guard, right? That's the one you want to pay attention to there. And if you've been a Checkpoint user for any length of time, what you will know is the cat's meow. What we really own is the simplicity of management. And so you'll have an overriding policy right at the top for any of the large cloud providers, including any hybrid cloud environment that you might make. And that overriding policy will thread through to the big 3 cloud providers. It will thread through to any hybrid environment that you've got, including your network security. So that's what you want to look for there, is making sure you've got one overriding policy so that whoever is using whatever cloud provider in your organization, we can make sure we keep that secure for you. Miguel's jumping in by saying human factor is key to cyber attack. It's a matter of time. Thank you, Miguel. We've got LinkedIn user here saying, Daniel, good, you're having conversations between yourselves. I love it. I think you just coined a new video game, Modern Warfare. Oh, he's talking about this, Dan. When I saw Daniel, I thought, who's that?
Yeah, I'm typing stuff while I'm talking. Yeah.
Okay. Moti, you're up late as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you explain ransomware protection techniques on the endpoint? I heard VSS shadow copy protection has some limitations and attackers target it. Are there other innovative ways to protect? Great question. Who wants to jump on that one for us?
Maya, your turn? My turn?
You are nodding. You are nodding, so you probably have a good answer.
Well, so let me start with this, is that you need multiple layers of capabilities. You can't just rely on one technique or process to be able to handle ransomware. It actually starts very early in the chain before it actually executes. But you need phishing protection, you need execution protection, you need behavioral analysis, and you need 7, 8, 9 different tools before you even have the ransomware protection capability sets. So Checkpoint uses a couple of different methods to be able to defend against ransomware. One of the methods we use is we actually watch the file system and look for signs of encryption. And if there is encryption and it looks like encryption, we kill the process and we restore files that were just encrypted back to its original form. And that's a much deeper logic than doing a shadow copy kind of capability where you're just basically taking a shadow copy of the operating system and reverting if it looks like it's been encrypted. We want to stop it in flight as early and as fast as we can, with zero impact on the customer or near zero impact to the customer, and be able to restore any damage that might have actually occurred. That's a prevention first strategy, is being able to actively defend at multiple layers in multiple ways against these attacks. Did I miss anything, Maya?
And I think that what you talked about is what I think is one of the most incredible products that Checkpoint has, really, which is the anti-ransomware component in our Harmony endpoint. But I also think that this is the last line of defense. And as you said, there are multiple layers of defense. And since we know how ransomware gets into networks, we have protections across our entire Infinity architecture. So whether it's malicious emails, so we have the mail security, and we have the file emulation, threat emulation. which is super important because many of these attacks start with a malicious file, say a document with a malicious macro. By the way, kudos to Microsoft who are disabling macro, which is one of the main ways of threat actors to get into organizations today. But there's also exploits, right? Vulnerability exploits, like in WannaCry. And since we talked about the fact that no organization can patch everything, also virtual patching is super important. So for example, in IPS, we cover intrusion prevention system, right? We cover, we do the virtual patching for all the vulnerabilities that are exploited in the wild. But this is just technology, and I want to also tie back to the previous question or remark, which was about the human factor, and this is also super important to attend. So many of these attacks start with the person who unknowingly opens an email or clicks a link, opens a file, and I can understand that because many of these attacks seem legit. But I think that this is why, this thing that we're doing here is super important because it raises the awareness to these attacks. And in each organization, I think that it's very, very important to have some kind of awareness program where you share examples of malicious emails with the employees and warn them about clicking these links and opening these files which are potentially malicious, and how to identify a malicious email or, by the way, a malicious text on your phone, right? It can get through there as well. So addressing the human factor is also very, very critical in stopping current cyber attacks.
And sorry, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
It's one sentence. There's a reason why we say prevention first. If we can prevent it from ever getting past the first layer, there's nothing else for you to do. It's all taken care of. And if you wait for it to go all the way down to the operating system level before you stop it, it's already too late.
I like to tell customers, pick your poison, right? This is what the prevention versus detection debate has been about for the last 30 years. We've, I think, set our face against the tide by saying you have to go prevention, but it's a pick your poison conversation. And I prefer the one of, let's go prevention and deal with any of the challenges that might come out of that than detection and deal with real ugly challenges on that side. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to wrap the show. There's so many other questions and comments that I would love to get to. We have sales and marketing teams who will comb through them. You can contact us. I'm easy to find. Edwin Eddie Doyle Manhattan in LinkedIn. Boom, I'm the only guy that comes up. You know how to get hold of Dan's incident response team from checkpoint.com and look for the button that says under attack. And if you go to research.checkpoint.com, you will find Maya's team. The week after next, we're going to do another one of these shows in our Asia audience timeframe. Anybody can dial in. You'll find this living forever in the archive. So to Maya's point about, training people, you can just grab this and forward it. And I would suggest forward it outside of the department of the CISO. It wasn't that technical a dialogue. So I think we might be engaging enough to help the people that really are clicking on things that they don't understand. Again, I'd love to get to more of these comments. Thank you so much for being with us. We are here to help you, our customers, and anybody, any enterprise organization around the world to stay safe online. That's our dedication, and we'll be back in another week or so with more specific on ransomware. So, Maya, Dan, thank you.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, that was fun.
All right, beautiful. Stay right there. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Audience, be safe online. All right.